clean up the behavior of people according to some kind of ideal he posits. The most important is the notion of the golden mean, wherein the notion of a balance between extremes is preferred to make the abstract more palatable and set up a kind of ideal person. Addison invents a person called Sir Roger the Cavalli, a fictional character who is the embodiment of the ideals that the neoclassicals might uphold. This is a character that is central to the Cavalli papers of Addison and appears in The Spectator, as we see also in The Mischief of Party Spirits. Right? I think Pranjal would like to say something now.
Yeah, now we look at the seminal works of Addison and Steele, The Spectator, The Tatler, Volume the Second, and the Sir Roger the Cavalli papers. He's on the page of The Spectator. And as Professor Dr. Rajan Barrett mentioned clearly, the Augustan age, and got us through a brief description of the 18th century and how it made a huge difference to England and the literary circle. And the seminal works of Addison and Steele, the main contribution that they brought to the table was that they reached out to the common man. It was, first of all, literature was considered very elite at that point of time, and it is through The Spectator that a common man was able to avail literature in a language which could be easily understood by him. Some of his essays are Jills and Their Victims, Country Festival, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Knowledge and Time, and Reasons. Now you can see the copy of Spectator. Each issue consisted of one long essay printed on a single sheet of foolscap in double columns on both sides. This turned out to be the right format to appeal to the taste of a relatively new affluent class with an appetite for literature, but without the inclination to read lengthy books on the subjects treated in The Spectator. The Spectator was narrated by the voice of a character calling himself Mr. Spectator, a man who describes himself as a taciturn, a poor conversationalist who would rather observe and report than get involved in the scenes that he relates. Each issue consisted of one long essay printed on a single sheet of foolscap in double columns on both sides. This is how the Spectator was published. This turned out to be the right format to appeal to the taste of a relatively new affluent class with an appetite for literature, but without the inclination to read lengthy books on the subjects treated in the Spectator. As Mr. Spectator himself explains, I have often been told by my friends that it is pity so many useful discoveries which I have made should be in the possessions of a silent man. For this reason, therefore, I shall publish a sheet full of thoughts every morning for the benefit of my contemporaries. It is, I think, the silent man is the common man who is unheard, or a common man's need, which actually is beyond the basics, the literature he enjoys. Through him, we are introduced to this small circle of friends, each of whom is a kind of a social Ritz Small. You can see this bunch of friends.
Yeah. I think the Will Honeycomb and all the rest of them.
Yeah. Among these are Sir Roger the Cavalli, the country squire, and Tory fox hunter, Will Honeycomb, and gallant man about town. I think I'll go to the slide so that we'll have a clear look. Sir Andrew Freeport, merchant and man of affairs, and finally there is Captain Sentry, the retired soldier. You can see Sir Roger the Cavalli at church with the Spectator. The 1700s saw a rebirth of literary culture in England after a perceived slump during the previous century. The English Civil War, which lasted from 1642 to 1649, was followed by the closing of the playhouses during the Puritanical period. The settling of events with the restoration of the monarchy in 1660 did not seem to improve things. a tendency towards crude behavior and dissoluteness seemed to pass from Charles II's court into English public's life generally. It was fine to say that England was experiencing a literary golden age, but only a privileged few had the education or leisure to participate in this high Augustan culture. All this enlightenment had yet to reach the common people. This role was filled by The Spectator. The Spectator here is a seminal work in reaching the literature out to the common public. Part of its success in this lay in the fact that the common people wanted to be enlightened. Credit for The Spectator's popularity must also go to the beautiful prose of Addison and Steele. Gentle wit and a polished style made even the difficult ideas of Locke and Newton accessible to the reader of average education. French customs were in fashion at the time of Addison and Steele. I think Dr. Rajan Barrett would talk on the French culture and tradition which seeped into the villages at that point of time.
I think it's important to remember that Addison, in one of his essays in the Coverley Papers, is trying to say how the villages are the ones which preserve culture.
Yeah.
And the culture is adopted and it remains in the village for a longer time, while in the city it changes. Okay, this is a particular time which is important largely because the English culture feels threatened. They want to assert that they're English. They want to show that, look, we are English, we are different, we are not French, right? And the whole idea of Frenchification becomes a big problem, largely because at this time we have an important change which takes place in 1660, that is the Restoration. And in the Restoration, Charles II comes back from France, right? It's true that the English had terrible trouble with Cromwell and his totalitarian regime. He is a person who has stopped all the pleasures that people have. They do not have drinks, they cannot have their wine, and they cannot have their dances, and they cannot have their playhouse, they can have nothing of the sort, and these are extremely important to the culture of England or any culture which believes in being happy and being free. Now, what happens is when Charles II comes back in 1660, there is a kind of uncapping the bottle. This is bottled up emotion which comes apart, right? And you have excess of Frenchification of culture. So that is something that needs to be critiqued, because otherwise there's also the insecurity that, look, my culture is getting into trouble, my culture is disappearing, just like we have in India today. People in different parts of our country are bothered about Maharashtrianness or Gujaratiness,
very regionalized.
or the idea of Kannada-ness, all that disappearing. The question is, Englishness itself becomes a terrible problem here, and they are trying to say that this is what we call English, and this is not French, this is not Italian, this is nothing of the sort, but this is English, and we want to assert that we are English. By our culture, by our behavior, we show that we are different from other people. And one of the things is that one is moderate. Okay, I think I read out some time ago that we are talking about the kind of excessiveness, the kind of vulgarity, the kind of violence that is taking place, and the idea is that somebody has to find the golden mean and find it balanced, and that is why Englishness gets this kind of golden mean kind of status of being moderate, balanced, of not changing too fast or too slow, of slowly absorbing things and seeing that things last. And these are a lot of things that have got to do with taste and with Addison and Steele.
Therefore, these French customs got transformed because what is called Englishness and the refinement of English taste with Addison and Steele. The Spectator was one of the first literary endeavours to make a deliberate effort to appeal to female leadership. Steele and Addison catered to female readership in terms that they wanted to not only empower the common people but women on the whole. As Addison remarked in the issue of 12th March 1711, there are none of whom this paper will be more useful than to the female world. I have often thought there has not been sufficient pains taken in finding out proper employments and diversions for the fair ones.
I think I would like to say something about this, because there's a very interesting essay that Addison has about witches and other things. Okay, right up till the time of Addison and Steele, there was something, a practice, which is something that all of us should be ashamed of, and is something that Addison and Steele were very ashamed of, and that was something called the witch treatment.
Witch treatment, yes.
And the witch treatment actually means that if a woman is considered a witch, she is made to be tested in a pond or a river. If she can swim, then that means she's a witch. And if she cannot swim and she drowns, that means she's not a witch, right? And if she can swim, then what happens is people will beat her up and kill her, right? Now this is something that is normal, and this is in an age of reason. People are unreasonable, and there's a contradiction that Addison points out, that here you have people who are terribly unreasonable, and they want to kill an old woman because a handshake, right, which is what happens to many old people. And she also has a cat, right, and she also fumbles and talks to herself. Now all these are signs of a witch. A witch is somebody who keeps mumbling, fumbling, talking to things and stewing things up in a pot, and also has a cat and a broom, which most people have, right? And what is important is probably there was money linked to it. Probably people wanted to get the property of the old woman, and so they would call them witches. These are things that are happening in India even today, and I think we all know about it because we read about it in the paper. Now this is important because this is talking about women and how women are treated. Okay?
We also have the branding of women. We have the scarlet letter and branding of women as a lowly creature. If she is at fault and everything. So yes, I think Addison and Steele has worked in the areas in order to not only to empower the general people but also to women on the whole, in order that by reading a lot of literature that they would empower themselves and enlighten themselves at the same time. It was a part of the Spectator's mission to remedy this neglect that women were marginalized from the literature.
Yeah, but I think you said some time ago that we also talked about people being enlightened because of the question of the spectator, right? So you are enlightening women, you are enlightening everybody, and at the same time what happens is you are trying to see that your whole culture is an enlightened culture, because you want to compare yourself with the French culture, which is enlightened. You want to compare yourself with the Italian culture, which had the Renaissance and with a lot of reading and a lot of art and a lot of stuff behind it.
A sort of a holistic enlightenment in that terms. Much of this attention to women took the form of paternalistic moralism. Nonetheless, the women of 1711 were flattered simply to notice by literary culture that had hitherto been content to completely ignore them or treat them as mere objects of male desire. Addison realized that through women must come the betterment of society, and there the reform must begin.
Yeah, I do not think I like this idea of Addison, because this idea is actually saying that the locus of culture is women. Okay, it's also that men have to play some amount of regard to culture, right? The understanding is, if the woman is good, then the house is good. If the woman is bad, then the house is bad, which is not true. Okay, it's both the man and the woman who play an important element into this. But as Pranjal said just now, that this is a paternalistic kind of system where it is totally male chauvinist, right? They are actually saying that if women are reformed, then the house gets reformed, right? If women go to school, then society will improve. There is some amount of truth in it, because more learning means better families for everybody. But the men and the women, I think, should be educated. And it's not only women who have to be educated.
Addison knew instinctively the people descended to their level, and in a light storytelling form gave them what their minds were able to grasp. So in this sense, we can also say that he has blended the popular and the elite and woven them and presented in such a way that it caters to both the elite and also to the common people.
But I think there is also an important element of the Augustan age and of Addison and Steele and the general trend in literature at that time. Okay, and that is what I spoke about just now, to laugh people out of their foibles and follies, to reform society by an important method of giving them the sugar-coated pill. They wouldn't like to tell them that, look, you're vulgar, you're barbaric, you're violent, you're doing all these kinds of things. Nobody wants to do that. So what they would do is, they would do it in a mild and gentle manner, keeping the neoclassical golden mean of moderation or balance in mind, and actually following this as much as they could, so that you have a mild way of improving society.
Therefore, as they were not reading people, as they were not interested in homilies on right living, I think they did not like the didactic sermons of literature. Or I don't think that they like that what they don't like what they have to do, they have to be told what to do. So, nor capable of deep logical thinking, they must be reached by simple discussion on what occupied most of their attention, the little everyday affairs of the life.
I think I want to say something about this thing that you've spoken about, Pranjal, and that is that they were not a reading people,
Yes.
right? There is an Enlightenment thinker called Voltaire, who you all must be aware of.
Yeah.
And Voltaire says something extremely important, which Addison and Steele must have been aware of, and that is, unless you have a reading nation, you cannot have a thinking nation. Okay, it is the job of the politicians and the educationists of today to see that people read. Okay, but our educational systems are such that we see that people don't read, and we as English teachers and teachers in general do not promote enough of reading, which is a very sad thing.
I totally agree.
And what is important over here is, if enlightenment has to come anywhere, it has to come through reading. What do we do if people don't read? Addison and Steele have shown some kind of way, though that is long ago. We today have to think about how we can do something in our world today.
That's why I think the ideas of Addison and Steele seeping down to the common public is very relevant in today's day and age, as people are majoritarily unaware of the literary developments in today's day and age, because it's a fast world that we are living in. So I think something like Kavli Papers and Spectator something can be done about literature in those lines. As they had to be led, that is, the people had to be led as one leads a child, by arousing the curiosity which eagerly asks, what did they do next? So I think a lot of interest was generated by Addison and Steele through Spectator, as to they compiled the essays in such a way that it intrigued people and maintained the interest level of people. To most intellectual men, and certainly to illiterate ones, nothing appeals so strongly as the loves and hates, the joys and sorrows, the successes and failures, and the thoughts of their fellow mortals. So everything related to people in general fascinated Addison and Steele, and in turn fascinated the people, the readers, which Addison and Steele catered to. And Addison and Steele based the plan of the Spectator on this knowledge of human longing. Addison